I'm pretty sure we all agree that we would love to have a Jamar Chase or Amon-Ra St. Brown on our fantasy football team. They're guys that get huge volume and a great opportunity, and when they get that opportunity, they produce fantasy points. If only there was a way to find what other wide receivers in fantasy football have the same qualities. Something like a fantasy football cheat code. What am I doing here? Y'all read the title. You know I'm about to give it to you, a cheat code to find great wide receivers in fantasy football. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today, where yes, we're talking about a fantasy football cheat code, a cheat code to help you find great wide receivers for your team in 2025. Now, we're going to be going through a few different metrics in today's show, but two of the metrics I don't feel get enough love in this game. Now, I've talked about these metrics for multiple years on this channel, so here's a little pop quiz. Let's see who's been paying attention over the years. If you know what metrics I'm about to talk about in today's show, leave them down below in the comment section. Let's see if you can guess them by the time I bring them up here in today's show. So this is how we're going to work this here in today's show. What I have done is taken 64 of the top wide receivers in fantasy football and gathered their statistical information in 4 different metrics. I then sorted each metric by who had the best finish in each category and ranked them 1 through 64. After all 4 metrics were sorted and ranked, I totaled up their overall score based off of the ranking they had for each metric. Now, how do I know this even makes any sense? Well, there is a little bit of a way to confirm it. When I did this, based off the 2024 season, a few of the highest finishers in this exercise were Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We all know that Jamar Chase was last year's wide receiver 1, and Amon-Ra St. Brown was the wide receiver 3 overall. So if they're finishing high in these metrics, and they finished high on the season, we can kind of correlate the two together. Now, obviously, just because they did it last year doesn't mean they're going to do it for sure again this year. Things change. Players change teams. Players may be coming off of major injuries. So we will do this exercise and then go through each player and see if we think they can do it again in 2025. Okay, let's move on to the metrics that we're going to be looking at in today's show. Hopefully, you've already left your comment down below to see who's been paying attention over the years. The metrics we're going over are, first, targets per game. We want guys that are going to be a heavy part of their team's passing offensive game plan. But targets aren't the only important thing. The second metric is catchable target rates. Targets are great, but we need them to be catchable. Did you know that if a quarterback throws the ball away to the sideline, whoever the closest wide receiver was to the ball gets credited for a target? It may not have even been catchable. They may not have had a chance. So that target really shouldn't count. Catchable targets is what's really super important and something we've paid attention to here over the last few seasons, along with slot snaps. We want wide receivers that are playing in the slot. Why is that? They have more of an opportunity for defensive mismatches. That and a lot of the top corners in the NFL don't travel to the slot. So if we can find guys that are eating out of the slot, it only betters our opportunity for them to be a little bit more consistent and maybe have some more big time plays. And then lastly, we're looking at fantasy points per target. Can they convert opportunity to actual fantasy points? These 4 metrics can help you find a great wide receiver for your fantasy football team. So let's go ahead and start off with the first one and take a look at targets per game. And here were the top 25 finishers in this metric. I would love to put all 64 on the screen, but the font would be so small, you'd probably give yourself an aneurysm trying to read all the information. So when we look at the top 25, we see right here at the top, Malik Neighbors at 11.3, highest of the year. That number is great, and it should be expected. There was no one else really in New York to get that type of volume. There's another name down the list we'll talk about here in a second, but Malik Neighbors, obviously the clear number 1 in New York. Really, One of the big surprises is to see Malik Neighbors this high, and Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't even make the top 25. That is a disservice by the Arizona Cardinals. But then we had Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb. How about Devontae Adams? Now he's in LA. Can both him and Puka stay right around 10 targets a game, because they did last year on opposite teams? Given the past history we've seen with Puka and Cooper Kupp, I think it's still possible. How about Drake London at 9.2? He totally exploded the end of 2024 with Michael Penix. Dude was averaging like 13 targets a game. That would be great to see in 2025. Then we got T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, all at least with 9 targets per game on average. Then we move down to Chris Godwin. He was absolutely killing it prior to his injury in 2024, followed by Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, then Cooper Kupp at 8.3. Now he gets a fresh start in Seattle. What type of role does he actually see? Does he get big-time volume there, and can he stay healthy? Then we got Nico Collins, Wan'Dale Robinson, the other wide receiver I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the New York Giants. Really no reason for me to think that he couldn't see right around 8 targets a game this year again. The biggest improvement is the quarterback play, right? We're going to have Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or Jackson Dart, whoever it may be. It's better than the crap they had last year. And then we round out the top 25 with DJ Moore, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who could see a bump this year with no DK Metcalf and no Tyler Lockett there. Then we got Stephon Diggs. Who knows what to expect from Stephon Diggs right now with him out partying with Cardi B. Then we got Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Downs, Jawan Jennings, and A.J. Brown. So targets are cool, right? We've talked about targets now, but they got to be catchable. So now let's look at the catchable target rate, because that's what I feel is a lot more important. This is the percentage of targets that the wide receiver received that were actually deemed catchable. And right here at the top, holy mother F balls, Rashee Rice. 89.7% of his targets were deemed catchable. That is a huge number, and a lot of people aren't talking about Rashee Rice. Now, I understand why. Is he going to be suspended? He's coming off of a major injury. There's a lot of concerns, but still, when he's healthy and on the field, dude is getting fed great balls, if you know what I mean. How about number 2 on the list? Jayden Reed. Probably one of the biggest headaches in 2024, but this number right here, 84% of his targets being catchable, that tells me that he just did not get enough volume. Now, if you remember the 2024 season, it was a headache every single week because they were not throwing him the football. When he got the football, he produced, just didn't get it consistently. Then we got guys like Ray McCloud at 82.8, more of a check down guy. How about Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Godwin, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, a lot of the usual suspects up here, followed by Devontae Smith, Ladd McConkey, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Marvin Mims made this list along with Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Khalil Shakir in Buffalo, Stephon Diggs once again. How about DeAndre Hopkins? He's no longer in Kansas City. Now he's in Baltimore. Then we got Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin. Now he's got to split duties with Deebo Samuel. Do his numbers take a slight hit in 2025? Then we got Tyler Lockett. He's in Tennessee. Malik Neighbors at 74.1%. That number could increase now with better quarterback play in 2025. Then we got Cooper Kupp, Brian Thomas Jr., DJ Moore, and then Jawan Jennings to round out the top 25 here for catchable target rate. A very important metric that a lot of people do not talk about. All right, now let's go ahead and find out the guys who get the great opportunity out of the slot. We love slot wide receivers here, and if you play fantasy football, you should too. So here are the top 25 finishers in slot rate. Their percentage of routes run out of the slot. Right at the top, we got Christian Kirk. If he could stay healthy, we know he's going to produce. No longer in Jacksonville, now in Houston. Could get a great opportunity with no Tank Dell this year if Christian Kirk can stay on the field. How about Wan'Dale Robinson? More of a guy that's going to rack up a lot of receptions, just not a lot of yards and touchdowns, but definitely a part of that check down game in New York. Then we have JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Love to see him 74.3% of the time in the slot. Then we got Adam Thielen. And Josh Downs is another name that we're starting to see pop up here quite a bit. Khalil Shakir again, Ladd McConkey, Devon Vele, Jayden Reed, Chris Godwin. We talked about his usage in the slot, and that's why he found so much success last year. Cooper Kupp, Calvin Austin in Pittsburgh. Now with no George Pickens, all we got is DK Metcalf, and we got Calvin Austin as well. Can Mason Rudolph actually feed him catchable balls is the biggest question mark. Then we got CeeDee Lamb. He didn't have his starting quarterback for a lot of the season last year. Dak Prescott should be back and healthy. Then we got Devontae Smith, Stephon Diggs. We've seen Diggs move to the slot more later in his career. How about Devontae Adams? Adams. 43.9% of the time he lined up out of the slot. That is ridiculous. And now with Cooper Kupp gone, could they do that in LA this year with Davante Adams? It's entirely possible. Then we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice, Ray McLeod, Drake London, Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, both San Francisco 49er wide receivers right here, along with Zay Flowers. And I was a little bit shocked to see that Jamar Chase lined up in the slot, almost 31% of his routes run. That's not something I really noticed, I guess you could say, during the season, but love to see him be so utilized out of the slot. So, all right, now we've seen who's gotten the volume, who's got the catchable volume, who's seen those mismatches out of the slot. But now that they've had all that opportunity, were they able to convert it into fantasy points per target? Can they turn that volume into points? And we look at the top 25 here. There may be some surprises. Right at the top, Jaden Reed at 2.63. That means he scored 2.63 fantasy points for every target he received in 2024. That number is huge. If I were the Green Bay Packers, that dude would be getting at least 8 targets a game. Is it going to happen? Probably not. They got too many wide receivers there just eating into each other's ceiling. How about Marvin Mims? He really came on late. More of a bigger play type guy. Didn't see huge volume. Could see the increase this year. Same with Rashad Bateman and Alec Pierce. How about Jamison Williams? Took a huge step forward in 2024. He averaged 2.33 fantasy points per target. Huge numbers. Then we got Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin, Adam Thielen, Devontae Smith, Rashee Rice at 2.24 along with A.J. Brown. Anybody here over 2 is basically considered elite. So 24 of the top 25 guys scoring over 2 fantasy points per target. That right there is like the chef's kiss. That's like the cherry on top. That's what we're looking for. Over 2 points per target is a huge number. So I put it up here so you can see we had guys that rounded out this list like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Ladd McConkey, Jordan Addison, BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, Justin Jefferson, Calvin Austin, T. Higgins, Ricky Pearsall, and Rashid Shaheed all scored at least 2 fantasy points per target in 2024. Those are huge numbers. So, okay, now that we've gone through and put these guys up against each other in each one of these metrics, who had the highest combined finish across all these metrics? Well, before I reveal who finished inside the top 20 overall, if you're enjoying this information, just a quick reminder, our draft guide is already available right now. Yes, it's still early in the offseason, but because our guide is internet-based, we can add and update information constantly, and we're going to do that up until week 1 of the NFL season. So head over to tfhdraftguide.com and get yours now. If this video can reach 500 likes, I'm going to randomly pick someone who left a comment down below and give them a free draft guide. So be sure to leave your comment down below, hit the like button, and get yourself a draft guide. We got rankings, sleepers, breakouts, busts, injury analysis, player profiles, and so much more. But all right, let's get back into who finished highest in our show here today. Now, when we combined all 4 of these metrics, these were the top 20 overall finishers. Right here at the top, we had Chris Godwin, and obviously he missed a chunk of the season due to injury, and now he's coming off of that injury, but man, it just shows you how good of a season he was having before he got hurt. Then we have Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Same thing can be said for Rashee Rice that was said about Chris Godwin. Had he played a full season, dude probably finishes top 5 at the position. Then we had Ladd McConkey, who came on super strong end of the year, and is going to enter this season as the team's clear wide receiver 1, in my opinion. Then we have JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's going to get a huge opportunity this year. Devontae Smith, Jaden Reed, Stephon Diggs, a couple guys with some question marks right there for sure. Then we got Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, Khalil Shakir, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Downs, Nico Collins, Jawan Jennings, and Jamison Williams. Now, some of these guys are on new teams or they're coming off major injury. That's really going to make their future a little bit unknown. Guys like Chris Godwin coming off of his injury, Rashee Rice coming off of his injury and a potential suspension. How about Stephon Diggs on a new team? Cooper Kupp, he's on a new team. So because these guys are a little bit more unknown, let's go ahead and just remove them from the list here. We can't really consider them quote unquote safer because there's just so much unknown in their new situation. Now, after that, there are a few guys that have a fantasy football ADP inside the second round. Let's throw their ADP up here on the screen because some of these guys are obvious studs. We know right now Jamar Chase is the first overall pick in a lot of people's drafts. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's in the first round as well at 8th overall. Ladd McConkey inside the second round at 23rd overall. How about we got CeeDee Lamb, 6th overall for CeeDee Lamb, 11th overall for Brian Thomas Jr., 18th overall for Drake London. A lot of guys up here inside the top 2 rounds of fantasy football drafts. Nico Collins as well. He's sitting at 12th overall. So because we aren't really helping a whole lot of people by saying studs are good, let's go ahead and just remove the names that are inside the top 24 overall picks in fantasy football. That leaves us this list. It's JSN, Jackson Smith, and Jigba at 27th overall. Then we got Devontae Smith at 52nd overall. Jaden Reed at 98th overall. Mike Evans at 33rd. Khalil Shakir at 90th. T. Higgins at 29th. Josh Downs at 109th. Jawan Jennings at 97th overall, and then Jameson Williams at 56th overall. So when we look at this upcoming 2025 season, what can we say about these guys that are left? Well, when we look at Jackson Smith and Jigba, we know the team added Cooper Kupp, and now Sam Darnold is going to be their quarterback. But DK Metcalf is gone. Tyler Lockett is gone, and JSN is fairly familiar with the offense they're running in Seattle. I love his potential, and at a 3rd round pick, I love it this year. How about Devontae Smith? Literally, there is little to no change expected in this Philadelphia offense. Could expect a lot of the same from him once again. Jaden Reed, he is impossible to trust with all the weapons they have in Green Bay. But like I said earlier, if he were able to get consistent targets in this offense, this dude would be huge in fantasy football. We just can't rely on him getting consistent targets. Then we got Mike Evans. They added Emeka Egbuka, but Chris Godwin is coming off an injury, and Mike Evans is still going to be Baker Mayfield's top wide receiver option. He'll rack up the touchdowns. He's going to get 1,000+ yards again. How about Khalil Shakir? He is so underrated, and roles are up for grabs in the Buffalo offense. I know about Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid, Josh Palmer there now as well, but Khalil Shakir is the safest pass-catching option as of right now in Buffalo. If he stays healthy and on the field, he'll be a pleasant surprise once again and crack 1,000 yards. How about T. Higgins? Now that he's been paid, you have to think that he plays up to his potential in that Cincinnati offense. A lot of people will think, hey, he's got paid, he's not going to try anymore, and I don't see that with T. Higgins. If anything, he wouldn't get on the field for some of those nagging injuries because he didn't want a major injury and then risk his long-term contract. Now that he's been paid, I expect him on the field quite a bit with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Then we got Josh Downs, very underrated, but has surpassed other wide receiver options in this offense, and it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. I know Anthony Richardson isn't the best downfield passer, but Josh Downs has turned into the most consistent weapon in the passing offense of Indianapolis, which should be improved this year. Then we got Jawan Jennings, the new wide receiver 1A in San Francisco. I'm saying Jawan Jennings is 1A and Ricky Pearsall is 1B. We saw Jennings explode at times, but now he should get more consistent volume in 2025 with Brandon Ayuk coming off a major injury and Deebo Samuel gone. And then we wrap it up with Jameson Williams. So much attention goes to the run game and Amon-Ra St. Brown that we could see Jameson Williams have an even better year in 2025 than we saw him rack up in 2024. Now, he may be a little bit more big play dependent, but in a high-powered offense like Detroit, big plays happen a lot more often. All right, so there you have a fun way to try to determine what wide receivers can be great for your fantasy team here in 2025. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, do me a favor and hit the like button if you haven't already. It greatly helps us out here in the offseason. Plus, we're going to continue to find exciting ways to talk about fantasy football. Turning on a camera and just talking about sleepers, breakouts, busts, it gets a little bit boring. Sometimes it's a lot more fun to break down the analytics and metrics together. So that's what we want to do here, and we will continue to do like we have for the past few years. Now, if you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel. We got you covered with all things fantasy football all year long. If there's a topic out there in fantasy football that you don't see a whole lot of people diving into, leave a comment down below as well. Let us know what it is that you want to see, and we'll try to see if we can make it happen for you. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headline Nation, we